Good morning. I'm Kristin Phillips-Hill. You don't know who I am. And just have to thank you for the great honor of serving as your state senator in our state capital up in Harrisburg. And I really want to welcome you all here today. Thank you all for coming out on this dreary Friday morning, but I couldn't think of a better way to finish celebrating National Agriculture Week than having a breakfast with all of my favorite people in the agriculture community here in Southern York County. So representing over 250,000 constituents, I hear about a lot of different topics and challenges and issues related to state government. And I have to tell you, agriculture is always at the top of the list. I know you're not surprised when I tell you it's the leading industry here in York County and across Pennsylvania. So I'm sure it's not a surprise that I hear from so many of you regularly. But this morning, you are going to hear updates on the state of agriculture in our Commonwealth, hear about grant programs, and many, many more things. So before we get started, I have to give a special thanks to our sponsors. They are responsible for this wonderful breakfast that you're going to eat here today. And those are our friends Chris Herr from Penn Ag. Make sure I don't forget anybody. Sherry Bonowitz and Josh Snyder from Energy Transfer. And the fine folks at Seneca Resources. So Penn Ag, Energy Transfer, and Seneca Resources are graciously providing this breakfast this morning. I also want to thank Secretary, yes, please give them a round of applause. You're going to hear from Chris Herr in a little bit. He can tell you a little more about what they do if you aren't familiar with them. Want to, of course, thank, I don't see him, oh, he's in the back of the room, Secretary Russell Redding, our guest speaker here today. And then we also have with us Representative Wendy Fink from the 94th District and York County Commissioner Doug Hoke. So thank you for being here. We can't forget to thank the wonderful folks here at Eureka Volunteer Fire Company. Their breakfasts never disappoint, and we're so grateful for the use of their fire hall and, of course, preparation of today's breakfast. So, again, thank you all so much for your time and for being here today. And before we get things started, I'm going to ask my friends Connor, Macy, and Brooke Anna, right here in front, to come on up and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. Now I'd like to invite Chris Herr up to share a few words about what they do at Penn Ag.
Thank you very much, Senator. I'm not going to do that very much. I want to take a minute. You don't want to be between breakfast and this group, so we'll move right along. I just want to thank Senator Phillips-Hill, the great job that she does on behalf of agriculture in Pennsylvania. There's 253 members of the legislature, and you can count on one hand the number that actually are on farms and out there representing agriculture on the ground. But that means that we need an awful lot of really good help who understands agriculture and is willing to go to bat for it. And Senator Phillips-Hill has been that person. We're really fortunate to have her in Harrisburg. I think you're fortunate to have her represent you here in York County. We look forward to getting to know Representative Fink better as we move along and make sure, and you guys can help do that today, encourage her to be a big supporter of agriculture. So. With that, thrilled to have Secretary Redding here. Appreciate all the work the Department of Agriculture has done. We see each other way too much, I think. There's a lot of real issues right now, and for the last almost year, it's been 24/7 working on avian influenza, which, whether you have poultry on your farm or are producing grain or in the agriculture business supporting agriculture, it will affect you. So really appreciate, and I'm sure he'll give you a little more on that, but thank you. And again, Sherry and the crew from Energy Transfer and friend Rob Boulware from Seneca, appreciate the opportunity to sponsor this morning. So thank you, Senator Hill.
Thank you so much. I'd like to continue with the program today and introduce our guest speaker, Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture Secretary, Mr. Russell Redding. And he really needs no introduction to this crowd of people. Secretary Redding is very well known throughout Pennsylvania and York County's agricultural community. And if you've attended the farm show, one of the many livestock sales in central Pennsylvania, or many of the other, the big ag dinner that we have coming up soon, chances are you have seen, talked to, or ran into Secretary Redding. He has an immense amount of knowledge on the many varied aspects of agriculture, and as we know, agriculture is York County and Pennsylvania's biggest business. So we were grateful to know that his wife Nina said that he could accept the offer to continue to be our Secretary of Agriculture. And we joke, but that's actually true. It's nice to know that a person who has been tapped once again to continue to head this very important department is someone who grew up on a dairy farm, who studied ag education in college, who worked as a public servant in ag policy in Washington, D.C. and Harrisburg for over 30 years, and who continues to be a farmer himself with his wife and his sons out in Gettysburg. So with that, would everyone please give a very warm Southern York County welcome to Secretary Redding.
Very kind introduction. Thank you.
It's all yours.
Senator, you are kind in the introduction. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you, and I will first say thank you to the excellent cooks, right, who are in that kitchen. What a beautiful breakfast. But also to those who make that possible. Right? It is a good reminder. I always like to sort of come to a breakfast because everybody, one, is hungry, ready to start the day, but it's a good reminder to what we do, right? And the importance of what we do, not just in the economy, not just in land use, but that sort of gratification and opportunity we have to feed both the state and the nation. It is a good reminder. And after the last couple of years, I am humbled by the generosity of the agricultural community every day, right? You cannot have a charitable food system without a food system that's charitable. It doesn't work, right? And I think this society that we have every day get a chance to feed needs to be reminded occasionally. And COVID, for all of its ills and challenges, right, there was a silver lining inside of it. And the silver lining was about food, right? The reminder that that doesn't just happen because we're good people. There are folks every day who wake up to make that happen, right? So you do that, agriculture in Pennsylvania does that. So to represent it, to work in it, to be around it, to work with the folks who, finance it, to engineer it, all the science, all of that work is always a good feeling. So it is good to be here. But let me say thank you to the senator. I appreciate what she does and Representative Fink as well. Chris Herr is right. I mean, we have a lot of conversations about ag, and they don't always have the identification of ag in them, by the way, right? They have food, they have the environment, they have conservation, they have finance, they have safety, but in the common denominator is around agriculture. So having folks who understand that industry, who understand the complexity of the business, always appreciated and more important than ever. So a note of thanks to the senator for what she does. Had a great conversation with her as part of the confirmation process. One of the things you do as a cabinet nominee is go around and meet with every senator. And I've done that a few times. But every single time I come away smarter, right? For what I hear, what they share with me in terms of priorities, but also who they listen to, right? Who is informing their decisions about agriculture in their work in the Senate. And I can tell you that rung very clear to me in interview with the senator, you're there, right? You're advising her on what to do and what your county needs. So thank you for that commitment as well. I feel like at these breakfasts we do, I could spend time just going table to table and say thank you. Right? There's a lot of things I can say, but there's nothing more important than a simple thank you. Right? To our commissioners who are working with us every day, Commissioner Hoke is here, and I just want to say thank you to him. But counties across the state are full partners with us on conservation, right? The work we do in dog law, the work we do in food assistance and food safety. Make your list of what we do. You cannot do that as a department without the county commissioners and the county support. For those who are in conservation, both in the preservation and the conservation side, thank you. Your county is amazing. I like your county better when I can see it, right? Like this morning coming across in the dark and rain, a little hard to appreciate all of your county. It's got a lot of hills, by the way. A little misunderstood, I think, right? I'm used to that sort of flatland. But what a beautiful county, right? It is an amazing county, amazingly productive county in so many ways. And I say this often, that everybody here thinks they're normal. Some, right? You are. I mean, what I'm getting to is that as you travel the state, you realize when I come back home to Adams County and Gettysburg, just how blessed we are to live in a county, in a region where you have access to metropolitan centers, right? You have access to grocery stores and good schools, decent infrastructure. There are places in Pennsylvania where that's a struggle, right? They have to travel some distance to find even a grocery store. So I always come back and appreciate what we have here in South Central Pennsylvania. So to those who preserve that, protect it, make that work, find the equilibrium, which is not easy to do, right? The equilibrium between sort of the industry and manufacturing and agriculture, increasingly challenged by both the cost of land, the competitive uses of that land. We'll talk about some of those this morning as well, but we can talk further about it. Just a note of thanks to each of you for what you do. Probably an understatement to say that these are extraordinary times, right? They're extraordinary both in terms of the world events that we see happening, right? The unprovoked war in Ukraine and the ripple effects of that across the nation and around the world, the issues of energy, the issues of the environment, flooding, all of that is the world stage. You've got the country. My view, I mean, it is difficult to have a civil conversation about some of the most important issues of our time, right? And that is a really important part of the work that we do. We've got to continue to engage around the really important issues because agriculture is at the center of some of the most important issues of our time. You cannot talk about jobs and economic development and food security, the environment, quality of life without talking ag, right? That's an important reason for us to stay, and even more reason to be together today to talk about agriculture. But they're also extraordinary for the challenges and opportunities. I mean, I signed on for another term with agreement, right? By Nina, who was very kind. She understands if you're going to do this job, it's not, every meeting's not in York County, right? You go to Erie and Mercer and train wrecks and Beaver and pick your issue, and they're a long way from here. So it takes a lot of time. But signing on was a commitment to continue the good work of agriculture. I'm excited about what we have in Pennsylvania. I like our chances, by the way. I like our chances a lot. To live in a state with 41 inches of natural rain, right? To be in a state with 3 ports that link us to the world when you're in the food business, as we are, is incredible, right? Port of Philadelphia, you can go out in the Great Lakes through Erie and through the Gulf of Mexico and Pittsburgh, right? It's amazing. To have a state that is number 2 in natural gas production in the nation. What we use and what we need is bad energy, right? So appreciate the support. Number 1 in agriculture. To have more young farmers under the age of 35 in Pennsylvania than any other state in the nation. Think about that. Under the age of 35, not my number. That is the U.S. Department of Agriculture's number. Gives me hope. #1 in land preservation in the nation. I can make the list. What I'm saying is these are all the factors that when we think about ag and food and why it's critical and why we need the right policies and why I want to be engaged, these are the things we deal with. We know those as factors, and this is a competitive, hyper-competitive industry. You're all here as friends, across the table having breakfast. You're also all competitors. I know that, right? For land, for markets, for a share of the stomach. 95% of the available stomachs in this world are outside the United States of America. 95%. 103 nations are food insecure in this world. I like our chances, right? That doesn't happen because, again, we're good people. It happens because a lot of folks work together to make that happen, right? That's a research, that's a history, that's a science, markets and infrastructure. So a lot of good things are happening in Pennsylvania, in American agriculture. We have diversity in the state. And diversity to me is like, you know, it is a differentiator for us. To have first generation farms and 10th generation farms. To have the Amish and the English, right? To have forest products and dairy and grain production, right? To be urban and rural. I've been places where I can't speak the language in Pennsylvania. I say often there is a pocket, there are these pockets around. It's the Bhutanese community in Pittsburgh that are every bit as proud of their food production in their garden as I am of my farm. Right? It's the Asian community in Southeast Philadelphia. 10-block stretch, 15 different Asian languages spoken. I couldn't understand a word they were saying until they put the drone in the air and looked behind the houses. And you saw this beautiful mosaic of gardens. Food was a universal language at that point. They're all out there, right? These are people that we get a chance to work and represent. That's part of diversity. And to have people who want to be in the business. I think it's a great thing. It's competitive. It's difficult. To have people who want to be part of you is a really good feeling. And that's where we are here today. We did this study a couple of years ago, born out of a conversation when I was under consideration with Governor Wolf. And he asked this sort of innocent question, but really important question. And he said, well, what is agriculture? How do you define agriculture? And when somebody who spent their life in it, you thought you had a really ready-made answer to that. And I stumbled. Stumbled in that there were pieces that he saw, having campaigned, and I will say the same with Governor Shapiro, that they saw that are part of food and ag that we did not have in our definition, right? If your pen's woods, does it make sense to have the forest products industry as part of your definition of agriculture? Yes. Does it make sense to count all of the food processing in Pennsylvania as part of agriculture? Yes. All production is the obvious one. What do you do with horse racing, right? Incredibly important to Pennsylvania. There's folks here who have a history with that and know that piece well. We've made significant investments. What about all the green industry, right? All of that is part of ag. So long story to say, it put us on a trail to go to Temple University, the Fox School of Business, and ask them, help us define agriculture. I'm a product of Penn State, no offense to the dean and others. But if I ask the dean of agriculture at Penn State, is agriculture important as our land-grant university, what's the answer? Of course it is. I have a different expectation when we go to Temple, and I go to the Fox School of Business. We wanted fresh eyes to help us define that. So they did. It ended up helping us to both identify what it is, quantify its significance. In Pennsylvania, that's 18% of our gross state product is food and agriculture. 18%. Significant piece of the economy. It also helped us define sort of what does it need, right? It wasn't just look at it and tell me the size and scale. The question was, what does it need to remain important piece of our economy in the future? That became, by the way, the Pennsylvania Farm Bill. And I want to say thank you to Senator Phillips-Hill, right? It's amazing. Only state in the nation with its own state-level farm bill. Only one. Focused on conservation, the transition of farms, the REAP tax credit that many of you have utilized as part of that farm bill. It's the work in farm to school. It's the urban agriculture components. All of that became the PA Farm Bill, which is really stands today. It's fully funded again in this first budget of Governor Shapiro. Proud of that. 2,200 different projects we've done across the state, from being able to help the Bhutanese community in Pittsburgh, right, to doing REAP tax credit and new planters and tillage equipment in York County. All of that is inside the Farm Bill. So a lot of good things are happening. I'm proud of it. There's a lot to do yet. But we also are challenged, right? And Chris Herr mentioned this high path avian influenza, right? It is a real challenge. You know, we've got states overnight, Texas and Florida and Ohio, that are now banning our birds coming into their states because of actions of Pennsylvania, right? We are a $7.5 billion industry in poultry, right? 11,000 people, at least by our records, have poultry on their premise. 3,000 of those roughly, Chris, I think are commercial scale. But as we've said many times, this is a virus that doesn't care the size or scale, it cares about species. That's the issue. So we have a lot of activity with backyard birds. We have folks who have, I call them companion animals, right? Companion poultry, right? Fine. But this is an issue that we're challenged by on the commercial scale. And across Pennsylvania, we're now at roughly 60 different flocks or premises that have been positive. We continue to be challenged by that. We've got a couple of days now with no new positives. But to put it in perspective, it is so important because it becomes both a domestic issue. We've seen the implications on egg prices, right? And what's happened is you take 60 million birds out of production in the U.S., you end up with implications, right? You put on top of that inflation, you magnify the problem. But our challenge is both the other states, because all this product doesn't stay in Pennsylvania, by the way. So what other states think about our controls, about our biosecurity, our systems and animal health are critical to that. And we also realize what the world thinks. We have a lot of product that goes into the world market. So having them assured and reassured that we are doing everything possible to contain and suppress this virus is critical, right? So it's a big piece of PA agriculture. A year ago, the first case in Pennsylvania was April the 14th. In 2023, that first positive was on January 30th. These birds are as confused as we are. They're migrating sooner, right? This is exact back and forth, right? We're in the Atlantic flyway. Look at where we are. I've got a bird tracker on my phone that I can look at every night and know how many birds are in the air. That's our exposure, right? Where those birds are going, where are they? Are they over, south central PA? Are they flying a little more west or east? Makes a big difference, right? So that is an issue for us to deal with. I'm proud that, last year we were able to get recovery funds in the budget. And again, I'll say thank you to the senator for that, just making sure that we have recovery funds for those folks who are positive, have positive flocks. But also importantly, as Chris and I know, it is those in the neighborhood who are caught inside of control zones that no fault of their own, they may be without a paycheck. And we're not making anybody whole here, but being able to cover the bank obligations and utility bills and keep people employed is part of that recovery fund. Of 47 states with high path AI, again, the only state with a recovery fund to make sure that we are bridging from the disaster to that better day. So important work being done there, and we can talk more about that as well. A couple of points, and I'll stop and reserve time. I know there are a lot of questions in this room just by the few minutes of trying to get some coffee. I know that there are issues. I want to talk about those. But a couple of things to highlight. One is just on budget, right? Budgets drive priorities, they drive investments, they allow you to do things or not do things. And we have a budget this year with Governor Shapiro that is really an excellent budget for agriculture. It is a good budget for ag, right? And one of the conversations with the governor when do I stay, go back and farm and do the other things in life was to ask. One is we have to address the issues of permits, right? If you're trying to build something, right, you're trying to get the conservation on the landscape or expand the business, you have to address the issues of permits. We have moved from folks complaining about needing the permit to paying for a permit to now saying I just need the permit. And that evolution to me tells me that, listen, that's a cost of business. I get my obligations there. I just need to access the permit and make it as easy as possible for people to do the right thing. That was my ask of the governor. Make it as easy as possible for people to do the right thing. And they'll do it, right? But we make it incredibly difficult for them to do the right thing. So that was A on the list. Two is, let's get a decent budget for ag. Let's make sure the high path AI is addressed. Let's make sure that we're dealing with the farmland preservation issues in the state. There's both appropriation to that, but as I heard at the retirement for Patty McCandless, right, there's also a growing need to help counties address the issues of the annual inspections that are required, the transitions of these preserve farms. And having a preserve farm, I look at that deed often, and it says that this farm shall remain a productive agricultural asset in perpetuity. Shall. It doesn't say if you like to, if your siblings want to, shall. Shall means something, right? That conversation about transition, and 25% of the preserve farms roughly in the state have already transitioned to one generation. There's another 10% that have transitioned to a second generation. So do the folks who own that easement today have the same appreciation for what mom and dad or grandpa and grandpa did, right? That conversation is a really important question because the deed ain't changing. So how we handle that and assist those new resources there to assist the counties across the state, 58 of them who work with us in partnership, there's resources there. The high path AI I've mentioned, we're going to invest in a center of plant industry. We've done the livestock pieces in years past. The plant folks have said to me, I live with the apple growers, Paul, they're all very vocal. They said, what about us? I mean, what about the excellence work in plant and horticulture? And then we've got a center for organic ag, right? Third in the nation, $1 billion last year in organic sales in Pennsylvania, fourth in the number of farms of organic, right? Governors transition between both. It is not only about how it's produced when you talk about organic. It is where it's produced, right? That is a label that others in foreign countries can meet the standard and sell that product as USDA organic. We believe very strongly. We've got a brand, a really great brand, right? Why not combine that with Pennsylvania, right? $710 million in poultry, organic poultry sold last year, right? A waiting list of farms to join those folks who are doing that. So all of that to say that is part of this budget as well. Spotted lantern flies, all of it. There's one item inside of animal health we'll continue to work on with Chris and the senator and others to make sure that that is done. And final, just on, much like the opening comment about counties partnership, we can't do what we do either without the U.S. Department of Agriculture, right? If it's high path AI as an example, we've got 195 people in the field today who are majority USDA partners who are helping us combat high path AI. Just to put this in perspective, 195 people, right, who are working as we're eating. If you talk about food, you talk about conservation, you talk about dairy, go down the list. So what happens in Congress, what happens with the USDA is critical. We have, for the first time since the Civil War, the chairman of the House Agricultural Committee in Washington. When you have a farm bill being written, Congressman G.T. Thompson, right? Good friend, very focused, but think about that, right? The opportunity when you're talking about trade issues, you're talking about conservation or high path AI, again, all of that, to have the chairman from Pennsylvania. I think that is an amazing sort of opportunity for us. The governor and congressman have already spoken about priorities for Pennsylvania, but the first time since the Civil War. How did that happen, by the way? I think about it, well, how did that happen? But here we are, we're at this moment, and we have the Senator Fetterman as well on the Senate Ag. So we've got a good partnership there, but we have a lot of work to do on the Farm Bill. There's a lot of work to do. you have to get a plan. We'll talk about some of those this morning. We've got a short list growing, but it's short relative to everything that's in it. But a lot of really important priorities. So note of thanks to all of you for being here. Thanks to our county leaders and commissioners and treasurer and teams that help this both county and state function well, right? And help us do our job in agriculture. So I'll pause there, and questions or comments are welcome. Perspective on what we need to do both at the state, what we can do in the advocacy on the federal side are also welcome. So Senator, I'll turn it back to you.
I want to thank the Secretary for re-upping for another tour of duty. And very early on when we first met, he talked about how a vibrant, successful agricultural community is essential for our nation's national security. I could not have agreed any more then, could not agree any more now. You are so important in so many ways to protecting our nation, to our economy, and really to the incredible quality of life that we all enjoy here in Southern York County. So with that, I want to say thank you. Secretary and I are here. If you have any more questions, we're happy to answer them. Thank you, and here's hoping that you have a very successful season. Thank you.